Welcome to Attenuation, a weekly podcast where two friends come together to drink beer, discuss beer styles and trends, and just generally ruminate on the meaning of life, aka beer. If you enjoy your time with us, we invite you to become a weekly listener and subscribe to the podcast. Without further ado, here is this week's episode.
Hello, and welcome to episode 13 of Attenuation, a beer podcast. My name is... All right, we're starting over. Hello, and welcome to episode 13 of Attenuation, a beer podcast. My name is Jason, and I'm joined by my best friend since 8th grade, Steven.
That's me. Oh, crap. Hello, I didn't write it down.
This is why you need a script, Steven. I'm going to make you a cue card.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, can you just hold it up?
And then I'll hold it up. Because we can see each other, so...
That's me is at the end of the podcast.
Yeah, you got to do hello in the beginning, and that's me at the end. It's okay. We're going to leave it in. People like it like this.
People are like getting sick of this trope that we can't get there.
It's not a trope. We just can't do it.
Yeah, this is just our patheticness.
This episode, no, it's because we leave it in. We leave it in for the joy of the listener. Not an overly polished product.
Somewhat polished, but I do a lot of editing on the back end.
It's a semi-precious metal.
But I can only work with so much, you know.
Oh my god. Okay, so today we are covering the cost of craft beer. And we'll explore that from a number of different angles. But before we start that, we got to do the best part of the podcast, and that's drinking beer. Yeah. So I will introduce...
the meme that goes along with this episode is me just throwing money, the kid throwing money out the window. That's...
Yes.
Because that's me in craft beer.
You just spend all your money on craft beer. That's awesome. Okay, so today I'm going to be drinking a dessert stout. Surprise, surprise. This is called Warming Hut Memoirs. It's from Humble Forager. They're based in Wisconsin. And this is a 12% imperial pastry stout. And it says it's a pecan pie pastry stout. So it says they added pecans, vanilla, cinnamon, maple syrup, and brown sugar. So I think this is going to be a very sweet one.
Yeah, that's when you eat after dinner for sure. Or you drink. You don't even eat it.
A dessert beverage. And this is pouring in inky black.
My gosh. It's like dripping.
It's like so
like
thick.
Ink.
Yeah, it is like ink. And then it has a super minimal, very dark brown head, but it's very minimal and it's immediately dissipating. Ooh, it smells like pecans. Believe it or not. Pecans, like black coffee, caramel, vanilla, cinnamon, and just that real dark malts. Okay, I'm excited to try this one. I'm going to start tasting this one, get some tasting notes, and I'll let Steven introduce his beer of the night.
I am drinking, it's called Where Is Tomorrow from Anchorage Brewing. This is a IPA brewed and dry hopped with Motueka hops, Nelson Sauvin hops, and Phantasm powder.
You got one?
I got some Phantasm powder beer.
Oh, I'm so jealous.
You should be.
I'm excited. I want to know if it's worth the hype.
So this Phantasm powder is coming out of New Zealand, and so it's really cool that they paired it with Motueka and Nelson Sauvin hops because those are both New Zealand hops. Motueka, actually, I talked about last week in my favorite beers, the Mage from Anchorage Brewing that made my top 10 list.
Oh yeah.
That was brewed with Motueka hops. That one has a very specific, very unique lime characteristic, which is why they paired it with the lime zest in that IPA.
Oh, cool.
So anyway, so this should be the Nelson Sauvin hops give like a white grape flavors, wine grape fruitiness, and like a lot of people describe it as gooseberry, crushed gooseberries. I don't if you've ever had crushed gooseberries.
I'm not familiar. No.
I love when the flavor gets parsed out as crushed gooseberry. I'm like, okay.
I couldn't even tell you what a gooseberry looks like.
I don't know. I love that, though. Okay, you're a true beer snob when you're like, oh, I'm getting crushed gooseberries in this one. So, again, the point of the Phantasm powder is to amp up the aromas and the flavors. I guess it would be easier to do that if you had like a non-Phantasm powder version and then a Phantasm powder version. I don't know. But
Yeah,
anyway.
do a side-by-side. Yeah.
So, very nice hazy IPA. Pale straw color. Very minimal head on this one, too. And I kind of poured it hard, and it's a very effervescent, fast dissipating head on this one. I can smell it from quite a ways away, though. So
Just that Phantasm powder.
Definitely the Phantasm powder. Okay, so my nose notes on this one are pineapple. Up very, very strong pineapple up front. A little bit of orange rind, and definitely a little bit of that white wine smell too. What are you tasting over there?
So I'm going to give initial tasting notes, but then I also want to say before I give a rating on this, I think it's still too warm. Or sorry, it's still too cold because I pulled it right out of the fridge. So I made the classic mistake that I said I wasn't going to do last time. I should have pulled this out like 10 minutes ago because I'm not 100% sure if I like it, but I think I'll like it as it warms up. But it is true to its description. I'm getting a lot of pecan, caramel, chocolate, and cinnamon up front. It's pretty sweet though, and I don't know. We'll see if I can drink a whole can of this. It's also 12%, so that can be quite the adventure. So I'm going to reserve judgment on this one until it gets a little bit warmer, and then I'll give you my thumbs up or thumbs down.
Tell me again because I never pay attention. Who's the brewer?
It's Humble Forager,
Humble
and they
Forager.
are from Wisconsin.
Hmm.
Yeah, I've actually never heard of them before. This is just I saw this on Tavor, and it's a dessert stout, which I really like. So just went for it.
Nice. Well, my beer's only 6%, so I can drink twice as much as you.
Yeah, and then we'll be on the same page.
All right. I'm going to now jump into it. I was so mesmerized by Jason talking that I forgot to start drinking this. But we can edit all this time out because it's a very polished podcast.
It's semi polished.
Okay, this wasn't very good at first. Just dull, like bitter flavors coming across first. Like it wasn't. I don't know. Maybe that's that sort of like dry white wine flavors coming through. But then there's a really, really good pineapple finish. Really good, like lingering pineapple finish, like still lingering.
Is that Phantasm powder?
Magic. You know what's interesting? It's very drinkable. There is this sort of upfront dryness and bitterness to it, but it sweetens out at the end, and like I said, gives you a nice, great lingering pineapple finish. It's not very complicated. It is pretty simple. I was kind of hoping I would get a little bit more lime from the Motueka hops, but I don't know. I don't know if I could say that the Phantasm powder is really doing anything. Like I said, it's hard to know unless you're comparing to a non-Phantasm powder beer. I did smell it from pretty far away right when I opened it, so it may be boosting the aromas more than the flavors. Yeah, I mean, this is solid IPA. It'd be interesting to do it with like hops I'm more familiar with. So maybe like a Citra and Galaxy hopped beer with Phantasm powder would be interesting to see.
So what you're saying is they need to make a pseudo-sue with Phantasm powder.
Yeah, right. And I think they're going to start doing that. You're going to start seeing that for sure.
That'd be really cool. That I agree. You got to do it side by side. Because I don't know if you're going to be able to tell in isolation.
Yeah, because I think you mentioned too that you saw that other half is doing a Phantasm powder version of their Mosaic Dream or whatever.
Yeah, their double Mosaic Dream, I think they're doing. So that'd be perfect if you could get the two side by side. Then you could really tell if the Phantasm powder is doing anything.
Yeah, I think that's something you're going to start seeing now with this ingredient. If it catches on, is just iterations of a already established beer with Phantasm powder added. So
yeah, just put another spin on it. So we'll have to see if it's just hype and marketing and a trend, or if it's actually gonna be worth it.
Like when they say double dry hopped, and you're like, what does that mean?
Yeah, totally. All right, cool. Well, I'm glad you got to try one. I guess the jury is still out on Phantasm powder, but we'll keep our eye on it closely.
I mean, I'm all about just saying I've had something.
But I think there's more on that later. Huh?
I'm like the name dropper of beer, you know. Like, oh yeah, I've had that. Oh yeah, I know that beer.
That's funny. I think every craft beer person is a little bit like that, though.
Well, I mean, I think when you get into a hobby, you want to know stuff, and you want to
Yeah.
feel like you want to feel like you know the most about your thing.
You gotta impress your other nerdy friends
Yeah.
with your peak beer experiences.
Right.
All right. Well, those were two good beers. Oh wait, so are you giving that a thumbs up, or are you giving that a thumbs down, or he's drinking it and giving me a thumbs up simultaneously? So that's a thumbs up.
Yeah, I like this. Like, I mean, again, it's not blowing me away, but it's a really solid, like, drinkable hazy IPA that, I mean, I love pineapple.
Mm-hmm.
I always like when I get pineapple notes in my beer, so it's good.
Nice. Cool. I think I'm going to give this one a thumbs up, but I'm going to wait a little longer. But I can't wait too long because it's 12%. And at the end of this can, I will give it a thumbs up because I'll be in a good mood.
Yeah, right?
Yeah. So, yeah, I got to rate early. All right. So that was our drinking beer segment. I actually have some beer news for us this week. Usually it's Steven bringing the news, but I saw an article and I got pretty excited because Sierra Nevada is making a new version of torpedo. It's going to be called Atomic Torpedo. And it says, this is our East Coast, West Coast hop collusion, unleashing the joint power of two styles, juicy East Coast IPAs and dank West Coast IPAs. Fused in this double IPA, their hop flavors span lush fruit, sticky pine, and floral tones. It's our classic IPA transformed, hazy, yet assertive. So, yeah, it's going to be hazy version of Torpedo. And I already love Torpedo, so I'm really looking forward to this. And I think this is called, I was discussing this with Steven a little bit before the podcast, and he was saying these are called New School IPAs.
Yep, starting to see a few of those around now.
Yeah, so they're kind of blending those two styles together. When this comes out, I'll definitely try to get my hands on it, and it'd be something that'd be fun to try side by side with regular Torpedo, just to kind of see the changes that they're introducing for this version.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways it kind of makes sense. They showcase malts a little bit more, like a West Coast IPA does, and then but more, dry hopping and no clarification, so you get that kind of hazy, less bitterness kind of thing. So
yeah, should be good. Okay, so we can head into the main topic, and that is the cost of craft beer. So we're going to purchase from a couple of different angles. One is on the consumer end, and that's, you, the beer connoisseur, purchasing your beer and the different ways you can go about purchasing it. And then on the tail end, we're going to cover a little bit about the economics of making beer and some of the things that we've seen happen over time in that arena. I know one of the things Steven wanted to mention first, and I agree, this is something that's an interesting thing you can do, but will increase the price of a beer, is purchasing singles versus purchasing six packs.
Yeah, so I'm one of those people, I don't like to drink a lot of things twice. And that's just mostly from a standpoint of this is very much a hobby for me. And I want to try lots of different things. And it's usually hard for me to commit to a six pack of something, especially if I've never tried it before. So grabbing a six pack of something and then drinking one and being like, that wasn't that good. Now I have 5 more in my fridge. So especially if it's a sour, because ain't nobody going to drink that here except for me.
So would you classify yourself a little bit of an experience seeker?
Yes, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I already said I'm a name dropper, so I like to. I just like to have tried, especially because, as you start to become known as like the beer guy or, the guy with the beer podcast, people ask you about like, oh, have you tried this or have you had this? And I don't know, I like to be, it always feels good when I'm like, oh yeah, I had that. Yeah, it's pretty good. I like trying a lot of stuff and I'm trying a lot of local stuff. And again, I just don't like committing to large packs of one type of beer. So I definitely end up spending more per beer because I don't buy in bulk.
Yeah. So this is definitely a more expensive way to go. I think a lot of places, we talked about this a little bit before, if you're trying to get into craft beer and you just want to try a lot of stuff, but some grocery stores and some alcohol stores will let you just pull one individual beer out of a six pack. They're just going to charge you more for it. So it's a more expensive way to purchase, but you can get a lot more variety. And this is something I still love to do, like the Total Wine. They have a whole section of just single beers, and they even have a little cardboard 6-packs, like the generic 6-pack holder, and you just grab one of those and just fill it with 6 random beers, and you have your own custom 6-pack. But they're expensive.
Yeah, I mean, I paid $2.50, $3 for one 12-ounce can, which it's pretty expensive.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, if you calculate.
Because what's that? 3 times 6? $18 6-pack?
Yeah, so you're definitely paying a premium to do that. But again, you're getting six different beers rather than 6 of the same beer. So it can be worth it.
Yeah, and I mean, I think, truthfully, it is kind of saving me money. Because if I bought a 6-pack, even if it was $10, and I only get the one beer at 3, it's saving me $7, really. Because if I don't like it, those 5 beers are going to sit in my fridge and probably never get drank. So really, I do myself a favor buying just the one can.
Now, Steven, is this rationalization or...
You just let me be me, okay?
I also have another important question for you.
Yeah.
You ever get imposter syndrome about being a beer expert?
I definitely felt that for sure, plenty of times. Someone asked me one time what's the difference between a porter and a stout, and I was like, oh, I should know this.
I don't know the difference between a porter and a stout. It's my favorite style.
Yeah.
I think historically there was a difference.
Yeah, I mean, historically, like, if you're going down the line of, like, darker and darker beers, I think porter is just a tad bit lighter than a stout, but your flavor profiles are going to be very similar.
Yeah, and I feel like there used to be more of a difference, and now there's not really a difference. So yeah, it's kind of used, though it almost seems like the word is used interchangeably at this point.
Well, it's like the difference between a brown and a stout is wider than the difference between a brown and a porter. You know what I mean? Like when you start to get more separated between styles or maltiness or whatever level of maltiness, then you're going to see a difference. But when you're comparing two right next to each other on the scale, and like with the way brewers blur the lines of what they call their beers, I drink a brown that Dogfish Head brown that I would never characterize as a brown. It was way more, way stronger and darker. So.
Oh yeah, I remember I saw you pour that into a glass, and it did not look like a brown beer.
Yeah, so brewers blur the lines of what they call their beers and how they categorize their beers, and it's not an exact science. So yeah, so I guess the point is that yes, I do feel like an imposter sometimes. I mean, I certainly felt like an imposter at the very beginning when I was hanging out with you, and I was just like, oh my god, this guy knows way more than I do.
I never felt like you were an imposter, Steve. If that makes you feel any better.
Well, that's good.
All right, I'm sorry I asked you about imposter syndrome in the middle of our podcast.
Oh, it's okay.
All right, so...
I mean, people already heard that we're talking about the cost of craft beer, and they're just like, they already turned the episode off anyway, so we can talk about anything.
It's just you and me. That's really funny. Oh, next we're going to talk about... Well, do you want to touch any more on like buying singles versus 6-packs?
Well, I think one of the things that ends up getting me and costing me a lot of money is getting beers I can't get locally, And I know we'll probably talk a little bit more later about buying online, but sometimes that's where you have to go to get beers that you can't get anywhere else, and you're always going to pay a premium because you're going to pay a premium for the beer and for the shipping. So
yeah, it's very expensive to get beer shipped. So yeah, that will definitely add cost. Okay. Well, yeah, we'll talk about that when we get to local versus online. I did want to cover a topic that's kind of near and dear to my heart, and I've covered a little bit. I've talked about it a little bit in the past, but I call this seeking price point. And this is kind of like, how much do I really want to spend on a beer? Because, well, one, I will say craft beer is a great hobby to have. Now, everything is relative, so it really depends. Everyone's in their own unique position. They have more or less money to spend on their hobbies. But craft beer is a fun hobby because you can get some of the best beer in the world for about $7 a bottle, which is pretty cool. That's not true of like wine. Like I'm in the relativistic world. I'm never going to get to experience like the best wines because you're looking at hundreds to thousands of dollars a bottle. And there's not really anything like that in the beer world, which is kind of nice. I mean, I live pretty close to the Russian River, so I can get a bottle of Pliny the Elder for about $7. That's one of the best beers in the world, in my opinion. So $7 is I mean, it's still expensive relative to other beers you might buy, or if you just want to buy like a 6-pack of like Coors, it's still expensive, but it's nice that it's not. It's attainable for most people. They could get a $7 bottle of beer.
Definitely. I think the most expensive beer I've ever seen listed, not secondary market or anything, but just listed from the brewer, was $100 for a 12-ounce bottle.
Do you remember what that was?
No.
I wonder what it was. It's so expensive.
Yeah. I think it was some sort of barley wine stout mix.
Okay.
Or something, and it's just, I think, just a product of, well, hype for sure, exclusivity, and aging, the time they spent on the beer.
Yeah, aging is always going to add cost. And, that's probably part of the reason wine is so expensive. There's a huge age component, which is pretty absent from most beer, except when you get into, like, barrel-aged stouts and barley wines and stuff like that. But yeah, honestly, what comes to my mind, I've never seen a $100 bottle of beer in person, but I've seen the brewery tends to be like, when I go to we have a local beer shop that's kind of like more high end. It's very small. It's like a hole in the wall, and they carry a lot of beers from the brewery, and those can be like $30 for a bottle, which is, to me, has passed the price point. So, I mean, I'm going to use. It really depends on the style, so this is a pretty rough example. But if we think about like Pliny the Elder, in that bottle, how much that costs, $7 or whatever. And you can do it by ounce, but if I'm looking at a $7 beer that I consider one of the better beers in the world, and then I'm looking at a bottle of beer that's like $30, is it really 4 times better? I mean, probably not. You do get there's diminishing returns involved. So you do hit a point where, like, I think maybe bombers aren't as popular anymore, but I think right around like $8 to $10 for a bomber is about what I want to pay, because you can get some pretty amazing beer for $8 to $10 for a bomber. And then it was interesting because we were doing some calculations, because sometimes it's really insightful to compare the price of a bomber and extrapolate out how much a 6-pack so the same volume, but if you pay the price per ounce that you pay for the bomber. So I made a little spreadsheet. So an $8 bomber, if you were to buy, that's 22 ounces. If you were to buy 72 ounces of beer, which is what a 6-pack is, for the same price, it'd be $26. So, like, when's the last time you paid $26 for a 6-pack? Have you ever done that?
Never.
Yeah, I've never done that. You know what's really crazy? Because we were talking about, in the pre-roll, we were kind of just discussing the topic, and we were talking about the Dissident, which is $16 for a bomber. Do you know how much that is, Steven, for a 6-pack?
No.
So at
$50? I'm trying to
think. Yeah, it's $52. So bombers are a little bit,
like if you were to get a 6-pack of like 12-ounce cans or something.
Yeah, if you're paying the same price per ounce.
Per ounce. Gotcha.
Yeah. If you wanted to buy 72 ounces of that, so a 6-pack at that price per ounce, you'd be paying $50. So I think bombers are a little bit. It's interesting because they're not as popular anymore, but I guess I never really considered how expensive they are. If you do calculate how much you're paying per ounce, they can be quite expensive. So it's something you might want to look at. I mean, I'm a huge nerd and I like to do math and numbers, so this is a good
show. That's like ranking up there with like printer ink per ounce.
Yeah, right? Yeah, like some of the Earth's most precious resources, printer ink. But yeah, something you can do. What's way more popular now is the 4-pack of cans, and those are usually like or are those 16-ounce cans?
16 ounce.
Yeah,
you've seen that a lot now.
So you can do the same. You can kind of do the same calculation. Like just divide, if you're buying one, divide the price by 16, and that's what you're paying per ounce. And you can extrapolate that out, like what I really pay. And obviously, when you're buying smaller quantities, it's just gonna be more expensive than if you're buying a 6-pack. But some of the packaging seems to exist to obscure the actual price that you're paying sometimes. So that's a very long-winded version. That's a very long-winded example to say. And I think Steven might take a little different approach to the hobby. But I do kind of I'm kind of obsessed with finding like the best value? What can you get you're getting something that's very good, but you're not paying too much for it? Because sometimes I think some of the money that you're paying is going into the hype or going into the name, like, oh, it's from this brewery, so it's got to be that good, And if you strip that all away, like, what are you really getting? Yeah, but
I 100% buy the hype.
So that's really good. See, that makes for an interesting dynamic on the podcast because we come from two different ideologies. So elaborate on what you mean by the hype.
I guess I shouldn't say totally, but I usually will buy into the hype of like a new style or a new beer or like a beer from like an established brewer or certain breweries with like higher status. That's how I got into like Pseudo Sue, which is an amazing beer. It's one of my favorite beers of all time. So it's like well deserved, but like, it's number 2 in the world, number 2 pale ale in the world. Like, I want to drink that. I want to drink like the best expressions of every style.
Because it's number 2 in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And people will say this, and you'll hear this a lot too, when especially people get all up in arms about the exclusivity of Pliny the Younger. They're like, oh, why don't you ship it? Why don't you make it year round? And blah, 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 blah. There's all these complaints about like, oh, you just do this to build the hype and that kind of stuff. And it's like, well, yeah, they do, because they can. They're brewing a great beer. Now, you can find a triple IPA that's probably fairly comparable, maybe cheaper somewhere else or you could just buy it year round or whatever. There's beers available, or beers that are just as good, or that people think are just as good, or whatever. And that's fine. That's fine. If you like Lagunitas IPA and, you really like that IPA and you like drinking that all the time, and you think like, well, why don't I just get the Lagunitas IPA and enjoy that every day? Like, I'm not going to go overpay for Pliny the Younger once a year and stand in line for 4 hours. Okay. But I'm going to.
I do too. So
yeah.
Maybe I'm only theoretically interested in price point.
Well, I'm sure there's different levels, but for me, I think the difference would be that for me, like, I'm almost always chasing some sort of experience like that.
I see.
Which is like, basically, other than like Briny Melon and Pseudo Sue, I'm basically always trying to try something new.
Yeah, that's cool.
There aren't a lot of beers that I just buy in large quantities and want to drink all the time.
You're just continuously exploring
like new stuff, and also trying to get those like hyped up experiences. I don't know. It's weird.
It's part of the fun of the hobby, I would say.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, it's part of the game.
And what's funny is that I get kind of stubborn sometimes. Like, for a while, I just did not like these new sours, the new like smoothie sours. And I think if you even go back to the Trends episode where we talk about lactose sours and stuff, like, I'm kind of not on board. I'm like fully on board now.
What happened?
I just had some good ones.
Yeah, and so now you're sold in the style.
And now I'm like seeking out the best lactose sours. That's like all I want now is lactose sours, because I want to find all the good ones, like all the best ones.
You heard it first on episode 13.
Well, because now, like, once you have a good one, it's like, oh, okay, now I know this can be done well, right? So now I want to find all the good ones, because I really enjoyed this beer. Now I want to go find who's doing it well.
That is the danger too of like what's popular, because there's guaranteed to be a lot of people doing it not well.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Because they're just trying to cash in on the hype or the whatever is in right now. So they're just pushing stuff out to kind of have a beer in that style, but doesn't necessarily mean they're good at making it.
Yeah, they maybe just don't know how to use it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting. I've had beers with graham crackers, right? Or like key lime pies, like full key lime pies thrown into the brew. One beer could use the graham crackers in the mash, the very beginning in the grain bill. It's just part of the grain bill. Another one might like the brewery that throws the key lime pies in at the end during fermentation. They could throw graham crackers in, like all those. Like, when you add it to the beer how you add it to the beer, all influences like what and how much of those flavors comes through. So again, I don't always know the specifics of how each beer is brewed, but I'm always chasing, the best versions of a certain style. And there may be some beer that really uses graham crackers and cinnamon perfectly in their beer. I mean, they put it in at the right time and the right amounts, and they just nailed it. And I mean, some of that comes from experience with the brewery, and how much experience the brewer has with working with these ingredients. And sometimes it's probably just dumb luck.
For sure.
And so it's also probably dumb luck that some of these beers just turn out poorly.
Yeah.
I mean, these breweries are trying to make a beer that tastes good, and they just don't always succeed at that. I hate to fault the brewer and being like, man, you suck at making these lactose sours, but
That's fair, I guess.
Are you you're trying to be bad, aren't you?
They're trying to be good.
Nobody's trying to make bad beer.
Yeah, this is not working out. Yeah. All right, well then that makes sense. So
but I'll get on board with the style. I mean, it's gonna happen with barley wine when I finally decide to dive in.
Dude, you gotta
I'm gonna get some barley wine, and I'm like, oh crap! Now I want to find all the best.
Go buy Old Foghorn from so it has that cool history. But then I think that's a really good barley wine.
Well, what's interesting about that barley wine? It's only 8%.
Yeah, there you go.
It's a very mild barley wine.
Entry Gateway.
Yeah, Gateway barley wine.
8% Gateway. Yeah, no, that's an intense style. Okay, well, you did mention buying online. So our next topic was local versus online. And I think Steven and I both do a little bit of both. We both use Tavour. Steven used it for a long time, so he has more experience. I kind of fell into it during the pandemic. I used to take trips to Total Wine because it was close to my work, but I've been working from home, so it's a pretty far drive. My commute to work is quite far, so it's cool. It's a big drive when you're just going to Total Wine. It's much more convenient when it's just on the way home from work. You're already there. So I started relying on Tavour, but it is expensive. But then you can get things that are not locally available to you. So that is definitely a choice. And then I know, Steven, you can probably speak to. Well, tell me a little bit about your Tavour experience, and then also speak to, I think you tried at Craft Shack out.
Yeah. So Tavour, I've really liked. I've had basically almost all good experiences with them. It kind of throws people off because I'll tell them oh, I buy beers online on this Tavour app, and they all just assume, most people assume that it's some sort of beer subscription, or they just send you beers every month or something. But the cool thing about Tavour is that just a couple times a day, usually 2 to 3 times a day, they'll release a beer, give a nice description of it, and give you the chance to buy it if you want to buy it. And sometimes there's limits on how many you can buy, sometimes there aren't, or sometimes if you buy more you save a little bit of money. But however you want to add it to your virtual crate, you can. So again, like I said, I rarely buy more than one of anything, which again costs me money because if you buy more, you usually save more. But again, I never quite know what I'm getting always, And so there are beers that pop up again that I've had before. It's the only way I've been getting Toppling Goliath beers for a while. So when those pop up, of course, I buy a few more of those. But yeah, I generally just use singles. But it's nice because you add it to your virtual crate. You can do that as much as you want or as little as you want, and your crate just fills up. As long as you've bought a beer, and it charges you automatically. As soon as you reserve that beer to your crate, it charges you, and it reserves it for you. So you know for sure you're going to get that beer. And then you can move your shipping date around, but whenever you're ready to ship your crate, you move your shipping date up, and it's $15 flat shipping for however many beers you have in the box. So the more you kind of stuff your crate, the more value for shipping you get. Again, I've had great experiences with the Tavour. Sometimes they're local delivery because they have to basically send it, and then the local carrier gets it and then finishes the delivery. They don't have a lot of control over the local carriers, and so you can have issues with them. And I have had issues with them, but their customer service is great, and They do a pretty good job. I've had beers that were infected that, that exploded when I opened them, and they've always refunded those beers. So it is a good experience, and it's a really good way to try stuff that you just absolutely have no chance of finding anywhere else.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I've had a very similar experience. I've gotten a lot of cool beers. The local delivery part is the worst part. They left my crate at someone else's house, like about 5 houses down. And the only reason I got it was because it had, for whatever reason, the label they put on has your email. So the lady was nice enough to email me and say, there's a box for you in front of my house. And I was like, my precious beer. So I was like, thank you so much. And I went and got it from her. But obviously that's not their fault. It's just they are handing it off to like a local logistics company, and those seem to not be the greatest.
Yeah, I don't know. The other hard thing too, especially like during the summer, is that you just have no idea what the temp control is going to be for that beer. And with so many styles now, I mean, I guess like basic sours, I don't really care what happens to them.
Yeah.
I guess some stouts, maybe I don't really care too much, that kind of stuff. But IPAs, these days I want them all temp controlled. Yeah, always. You don't want and then especially these heavily fruited sours. Those are the ones that usually end up being the ones that explode when I open them. Because they re-ferment. The fruit they add after fermentation ends up re-fermenting and creating a bomb inside the can.
Oh, is that what happens?
Mm-hmm.
Fascinating. And that's why it like gushes out.
Yeah. So if you can keep it cold, you
prevent that.
The yeast don't ferment. Yeah.
Ah, okay. I never knew that. Well, and I feel like too they have ones with lactose in them now too, and I don't know.
Right.
Do you really want those milk sugars getting really hot? I don't know.
Yeah, temperature control is so important these days in beer, especially with the heavily fruited sours. So I have basically stopped ordering any of those on Tavour, and that's I don't use Tavour very much now because of the styles that I'm interested in are just not ones that travel well. So, especially IPAs. I mean, if you add an IPA to your crate, but you don't end up shipping that box for a month, and then it takes a week or two to get to you, yes, it's probably super snobby and nerdy to be like, oh, I want to drink IPAs at their peak freshness, but I do. Unapologetically, I want to drink my IPA super fresh.
Nice.
And so honestly, I kind of reserve the IPAs to my local brewery, like on tap, because then I know I'm getting pretty fresh beer.
So that's basically the antithesis of ordering on Tavour is getting. Now, are you pretty big into like getting a crowler or growler fill or?
No, because I don't like the pressure of feeling like I need to drink it right away, which you would really have to do with a growler. And there's like 64 ounces of beer.
Yeah.
It's just too much. Even the growlers are still big, or even like 32 ounces.
Yeah, I think some of them are
32 ounce growlers. I don't know. It's just too much beer and too much pressure. I'd rather just drink it on tap in a glass.
Yeah, like a pint at the bar.
Just go back if I like the beer.
Yeah, well, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And that's obviously going to be way more economical when you're just getting it on tap.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you can take out a lot of the overhead costs of packaging and shipping and any middleman markups and stuff, you're definitely going to save money, and you're going to get fresh beer. So.
Well, and the nice thing, too, is if you're buying it directly from the brewery, they're not sacrificing, like, part of their cut to any middlemen.
It's supporting local business.
Yeah, which is always good, especially if you have very good local breweries.
And then the other online service I've been using is Craft Shack, which I just discovered pretty recently. And they have an amazing selection of beers, and they're always changing because it just depends on what they have and what they're getting and what they sell out of and stuff. But they really do have an amazing selection of beers and an amazing selection of breweries. The problem with Craft Shack is that if you're going to make an order, you have to make an order right away. So say one beer comes up that you're like, oh, I really want that. Like, for example, just recently, Heady Topper from The Alchemist came up on Craft Shack.
Oh, White
I mean,
Whale.
that's a white whale beer. But I wasn't ready to get on there and make a whole big order from Craft Shack. Because if I just buy that one beer, like that's just not economically. It's like $30 to ship from Craft Shack. It ranges from like $25 to $30 to ship. So I'm not gonna buy one Heady Topper or even just a 6-pack of Heady Topper. It's just not worth it. It's only worth it if you're gonna make a big order of a bunch of beers, and I just wasn't ready to do that. So that's the restriction of Craft Shack, is that you have to be ready to make an order that you're also ready to spend $30 to ship.
Because that good stuff is going to disappear, huh?
And it's going to disappear. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was. Within a few days it was gone. So
interesting. So you got to go on there when you're ready to spend.
Whereas tab or something good pops up and you're like, oh, you can reserve it right in your crate and you know you got it. Even though your box may not ship out for 4 or 5 more weeks or something.
Right. You're building that crate up over the course of like a month. Whereas with Craft Shack, you got to buy a whole crate's worth in that transaction.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's stressful.
Mm-hmm.
Because you want to order enough that's worth the shipping, but then like, do they have enough stuff in stock that you want at that moment to justify that shipping cost?
And the costs per can are ridiculous.
Yeah.
Ridiculous. Like a 12-ounce can of Left Hand Brewing, here, I'll try to give a good example. Left Hand Brewing peanut butter stout, which you can basically find anywhere. $5 for a can. 12-ounce can. Oof. Like, that's stupid.
Yeah.
Like,
and then you gotta
plus the shipping. It makes it like a $10 can of beer. It's so dumb.
So what you got to do is you got to use our price per ounce calculation and figure out how much a 6-pack would cost at that price per ounce. It's probably like $100 with the shipping.
Well, like, look, if I can get 10 beers, actually, let me think. If I can get 6 beers, 6 singles, 16-ounce singles of really cool stuff like WeldWorks or something like crazy lactose sours, stuff that I really want. If I can get 6 16-ounce cans, it's probably going to end up costing me with shipping like $60. So about $10 a can. Which is kind of crazy.
So that's a $60 6-pack.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But these are beers that I really, really want to try. These are like WeldWorks sours, like that Fruity Pebbles sour, or just crazy stuff I just cannot find anywhere.
Yeah, that's your
the price I think for the hobby.
It speaks to what you were talking about earlier in the episode about seeking out those experiences. Yeah, I'm just perusing Craft Shack right now, and they even have they have variety packs, which are kind of cool, where they've already picked out all the beers for you.
Mm-hmm.
But they're pretty expensive. So they have one featured right here. It's a hazy IPA gift set. It's 12 packs, but it includes shipping. But it's $110. So, I mean, yeah, you're almost at $10 a can, including shipping there. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So I mean, look, these are always going to be the barriers to getting beers from places across the nation, especially breweries that don't have wide distribution. It's just the challenge of packaging and shipping and covering all these companies' overhead costs. It's just the price of trying to get beers from other places, which is, I mean, it's a reason why I personally am trying to. We have new breweries popping up every day in the Austin area. It's ridiculous. So my access to craft beer on tap, it's incredible. So I'm trying to move towards that a little bit of going stop chasing these white whales and stop chasing these premium experiences and just start going to my local breweries and trying them all out.
Yeah, so you're kind of changing your approach a little bit.
Yeah, I think it's better, economically speaking, it will probably save me money, but just I don't know. I think getting away from chasing the peak experiences and just enjoying the beer that's right here. It's just a different mindset, but a more healthy mindset.
Well, it almost reminds me of the kind of experience we had at Bale Breaker, where it's almost everyone in there was a local and a regular.
Yeah.
And they had a much different relationship with the beer and the brewery itself, I feel, than it's kind of what you're kind of talking about capturing. It's like developing that relationship with your local brewery, which I think can overall be maybe even a more rewarding experience in certain ways than like chasing heady topper.
Yeah.
But I really want to
another
try
thing
one.
too is that we have a few of these like boutique beer shops and bottle shops that have, I mean, they're getting some pretty good stuff. The one that I've been going to is fairly new. I was talking to the owner, and he just worked in beer distribution for 30 years, and he's made these crazy relationships. He's formed all these relationships with tons of breweries all across the nation. And so he knows his craft beer. He knows what people want, and now he has his own little bottle shop. So he has the relationships, so he's able to get all this cool stuff from around the country. I'm gonna start going there more, because one, it supports a local business, and he's willing to listen. Like, hey, do you have this? Or he'll write it down and be like, oh yeah, I'll try to reach out to them and see what I can get, or that kind of stuff. So it's a more community feel for me as well, where I can go, and yes, I probably still will pay a premium for buying beer there, especially the singles, but I would rather pay that there than paying online with all these shipping costs and stuff too. So
Yeah, that makes sense. It's almost the best of both worlds.
yeah,
Because you're supporting the local business, but you're getting access to stuff you can't get access to.
exactly.
And we have a similar place actually in my local area that I haven't been to for a long time, but just you talking about that is kind of making me excited to go check it out, because I don't know what they have. I haven't been there for about a year, so gonna have to take a visit and see.
Yeah. Well, yours is fun too, because they have like stuff on tap as well.
Yeah, they do.
Right.
Unfortunately, it's like I have moved now, so it's a little bit farther from me, and yeah, I should get back there and just, especially if I'm in a situation where I have a driver, then I can enjoy myself. Because the other thing that's cool about that place is not only do they have a lot of things on tap, but about 50% of their inventory, bottled inventory, is cold. And you're allowed to just purchase something, and then they're happy to let you drink it there. So if you don't see anything on the tap list that interests you, you can just peruse their inventory and pick something and crack that open. So it's a pretty cool environment.
Yeah, that is the nice thing. Mine is the same way. Like, they charge you $1 to pop it open and drink it on the premises or something like that. So
yeah, there's a little cork.
Yeah, so that's pretty cool.
It's very fun.
So you just grab something out of the beer fridge, and then you hold it up, and he looks at it, he's like, oh, okay, yeah, I got you. Puts it on your tab, and you pop it open and drink it. It's really fun.
Oh, you have a tab.
Yeah.
You are a regular.
Yeah, it's really fun.
That's awesome. Yeah, so those are our main topics. Did you want to get into the economics of making beer?
I mean, we don't spend a lot of time.
I think that could be its own episode.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's always this, you have to rationalize, the beer costs, and it's easy to be like, oh, this craft beer just like costs way too much money. Like, why does it cost so much more than the craft lager or the macro lagers and stuff? But it is, we talked about time. Some of the aging processes for sure factor into the cost. But just hops, getting good quality hops. There have been, hop shortages recently with so many breweries making super hopped IPAs and stuff. So there's always going to be a demand of hops that can affect the cost. There's always different availabilities of water, and if your state is in a drought, it's going to cost you more to make your beer, and it does take a lot of water, not only to make the beer but to wash all the equipment and stuff. So a lot of water goes into that process. And your malts, I mean, your macro lagers, they use barley, but they also use some rice and corn, which are cheaper subsidized grains. A lot of craft breweries want to use the best malts and the best barleys, and so there's always going to be a premium for getting the good stuff, and that's why it's the good stuff.
Well, some of the barley, I know we're both reading the beer Bible, and some of the processes that go into some of the barley production and grain production seem very expensive.
Exactly.
When they're doing it in like traditional fashion and stuff like that.
Well, that's why home brewing is a hobby. It's not a way to like save you money making a batch of beer. It's a hobby. It's an expensive hobby because not only do you need to get the equipment, which is fine, that's more of a one-time cost, but going out and getting the ingredients for your beer that you want to brew, it's not cheap. It's not cheap at all. And then you've got to have, if you bottle it or if you keg it with CO2, you got to keep your kegerator clean and your beer lines clean, and that all just takes time and products and money, and you got to have CO2. You got to make sure your CO2 tank is full. So there's a constant costs. And so
your beer probably doesn't come out.
Oh, yeah, and it tastes like... Well, we'll keep it clean. Dog poop.
You got to refine your process a number of times before you get real good beer.
Yeah. So, I've made multiple batches of beer now, and maybe got like 5 or 6 really quality glasses. So again, but it's just an example of how like getting the ingredients, even just as simple as getting the ingredients and the water and everything, costs money. And when you make in bigger batches, especially like the macro lagers, that's going to be cheap beer because they're going to make a lot of it. That's quantity over quality.
And they have the economics of scale.
Yeah. That's why you're going to pay a little bit more for craft beer, but I think it's worth it.
Worth the price of admission.
It's worth it for the peak experiences. It's not just hype, people, okay?
We do have a podcast about it, so...
Yeah, that's true.
That's pretty weird. I don't think we'd have a podcast about something if it wasn't awesome.
There's no Budweiser podcast?
Hey, we've done... Yeah, how many episodes do you think we could do a podcast where we just talk about Budweiser?
A half of one?
I bet we could do like 10 episodes.
Yeah.
When we get bored, when we're on like episode 200, we're gonna give it a shot. We're gonna do a mini series, 10 episodes on Budweiser only.
Okay.
Write that down.
Yeah, you could probably make it happen with like the history.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, you could do it.
Search it out.
A little docu-series on the history of Budweiser.
That's one
brought to you
by Attenuation. We'll save that for our Netflix special.
Okay.
When they pick us up. Any day now. Check the email. See what the email does. Speaking of the email.
Oh, your segues are just seamless.
I know, right? That's why we're going to be on Netflix. Our email is contact.attenuation@gmail.com. So you can send us emails. We'll respond to you, theoretically. And probably a more direct route is to reach out onto us on our Instagram, which is attenuation.podcast, where we have over 30 subscribers. Followers? Subscribers?
Followers. Come on, man.
But yeah, so that was our topic. And then before we close it up, I do want to give a final rating for my beer. I'll give it a thumbs up.
Yeah?
I would drink this again. I think it delivers on its promise of the laundry list of flavors. It has a pretty interesting and complex entrance, and then it kind of falls off the cliff a little bit. But then it has a nice like vanilla cinnamon aftertaste. So a little bit missing in the development, but overall it's good. I mean, it's definitely what it's advertised to be. It's a pecan pie pastry stout.
Yeah. If
you're looking for a pecan pie pastry stout, you get one. Yeah, and it's 12%, so you'll have a good time.
It's funny because that's very similar to mine. Like, not a great development of taste throughout, but a nice lingering pineapple finish. So a nice flavor at the end.
Yeah, that's good. Sometimes that is good. I mean, the finish can be very important.
Yeah. Taste the leaves in your mouth, man.
Right, exactly. So yeah, I'll give this a thumbs up. as far as this episode, I think that's going to wrap it. So
Right.
My name is Jason, and I'm joined by my best friend since 8th grade. That's Steven.
That's me.
You did it. I'm gonna have cue cards for next episode.
I'm just going to pause and then make sure I say the right thing, and then I can just edit it.
Oh, it's that semi-polished experience.
Yeah, polish it up.
All right, well, this is episode 13, and we are bidding you adieu and cheers. Till next time.
All right, cheers, man.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Attenuation, a beer podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and follow us on Instagram or Facebook for more fun content. Catch you next week. Cheers!